One, two. Hi, everybody. I'm not a very experienced speaker, so I wrote down the whole talk, and I hope it will be not too monotonous. My talk is called Factory Visit. These are my students. I'm going to just move this. Sorry. These are my students. They're pretending not to notice that I'm taking a photograph of them. My students often use the word minimal. It's almost an obsession with things having to be minimal. For the longest time, I was rather confused about this idea, because for me, the word in itself doesn't mean much. Only recently I realized that this vague longing for something to be minimal, maybe in the sense of reduced, could be quite a fundamental one after all. Most people in Russia grow up in a patterned world, in a surrounding that is everything but minimal. Carpets, wallpaper, tablecloth, aprons, curtains, pillow covers, day blankets, everything is patterned. It is close to impossible to find a flat in Moscow without patterned wallpaper and carpets, let alone without any furniture. Flats are not being rented out as empty spaces to make your own. They're rented out as spaces that come equipped with the right atmosphere. A flat with right walls is an uncomfortable space. It's simply not finished. At the time that I wrote this lecture, I looked up images of flats that are currently available in the building that I live in. I found out that there are currently 6 flats for rent in my building. While the state of the flat might be in different conditions, and they might be variously equipped, none of them lack of patterned surfaces. These are all from sci.ru. I'm sure most Russians here know this website. Knowing how the flats look like, it is ever more surprising to look at the outside of the building. The building itself speaks nothing about the ornament that can be found inside. Instead, it is as functional and monumental as it can get, with almost 1,000 flats under the same roof. I have myself, for a while now, been interested in patterns, coming back to the patterns. It's quite an intuitive interest in an imagery that lacks visual hierarchy, where no element really dominates over the other. And then I find it, of course, also interesting that there are so many different notions about decorative art, that it is most often considered a more crafty field and somewhat less use or meaningful. End of last year, I designed this wallpaper in the cafe downstairs for MMOMA. My favorite part is the exit sign, which so perfectly becomes part of the wall design as a whole. Earlier last year, I was looking into wallpaper design of the early 20th century in Russia. It was curious to me that I could find information about all kinds of avant-garde design in the field of applied arts, but nothing about wallpaper. I contacted the former curator of the Moscow Design Museum. Her name is Alyona Sokolnikova, and I asked her if she had any tips. She was also pretty clueless about wallpaper from that area, and we guessed maybe it had something to do with wallpaper not overlasting time. Oops. At the same time we started talking about textile design. Ukraine had been the center of reviving the decorative arts in the early 20th century, doing so in artist-led workshops. There was a couple of famous workshops that involved contemporary artists. In fact, it could be said that the first suprematist exhibition was one about contemporary decorative arts, and not the famous 010 exhibition a few months later. Here you see a photograph of an exhibition which was opened in November 1915 in Moscow within an interior design shop. A lot of the works were commissioned by Natalia Davidova, who ran one of the workshops in Ukraine. The exhibition featured embroidery works and designs for textiles, amongst others by Alexandra Ekster, Ivan Pugni, and Kazimir Malevich. This photograph is from a second exhibition about decorative arts in 1917, showing a pillow with a suprematist design by Malevich, and on the top left corner, an ornament design by Natalia Davidova, that wealthy commissioner and artist from Kiev. I find it interesting to mention that the world of decorative arts in some way allowed artists a space for experimentation that wasn't available in the heavier loaded field of fine arts. If you think about it in this way, it was the field of decorative arts that allowed suprematism to develop. Many works that have been drawn and painted on the easel have later been translated into embroidery and weaving. However, this is not seldomly being ignored. Okay, getting back to my conversation with Aliona. Aliona told me about a Soviet collection of Soviet furniture textiles from 70s to 90s that she found recently. The textiles are from a lady called Irina Vorobyova. She's a retired textile designer from Moscow who has worked mostly during Soviet times. In her small flat, which is on the picture, in Moscow she stores many textile samples, most of them being her own designs. The story goes that someday there was a fire in the company that Irina worked at, and she saved many of the textiles by taking them home. Possibly she hasn't shown the textiles to anybody before because she was afraid of being accused of theft. I think this is quite a funny fantasy version of Amsterdam that she made. The company in which Irina worked is called MTOK or MTOK, and still exists nowadays. Many of the designs they sell are still from Soviet times. The production is both in Moscow and Pavlik Posad, a small town outside of Moscow. Aliona was at the time that we spoke preparing a proposal for an exhibition about Soviet textile design, and we discussed a student project in this context. So the next couple of months I wrote an assignment about interior textile design, incorporating a factory visit, a lecture by Aliona, a lecture by Irina, as well as an exhibition at the Moscow Museum of Decorative Arts, which will happen in 2 weeks from now. The assignment was supposed to start in the beginning of March and run for 6 weeks. In the assignment, I put an emphasis on first-hand research and encouraged the students to do more or less what a lot of them hate to do. Look at the interiors of their direct surrounding. It should probably be mentioned that most of my students live with their parents, as is common in Russia. Eventually, many of the students' works evolved into projects about the stories behind the textiles. The organization of the factory visit turned out to be the most tricky part. Aliona had offered her help to communicate with Irina to organize the factory visit. I'm usually pretty handicapped when it comes to organizing things in Russia because of my lack of Russian language skills. Saying that, speaking Russian is often not enough to make contact with certain places. One needs to speak the right Russian. It is almost like a secret language, a language of bureaucratic processes and remnants of Soviet communication customs. So the process of organizing the factory visit went a bit like silent post in a secret language. On 11th of February, I received a message from Aliona that Irina confirmed the factory visit with her contact in the factory. To this day, I have no idea who this contact person was. The visit was supposed to happen on March 1st, and we were to arrive at the factory in the morning so we could finish before 12 noon. But there was a problem. The problem was that I was being asked not to speak English. Reasons were not exactly clear. It had something to do with better not to attract much attention, that the factory might get suspicious with a foreigner. I was almost amused at this request, but then again, I didn't really feel comfortable having to hide my identity. I invited another colleague of mine into the silent postgame, because Aliona actually lives in Germany and couldn't take the conversation further. My Russian colleague Angela managed to comfort Irina that a very quiet translation to me should not cause too much attention in the factory. But we were asked not to mention the name of the British school, but rather say that we are from some school. On 18th of February, Irina got in touch. After all, telling that we were from some school didn't seem quite enough. The factory needed a document that would prove that we come from a school that carries the word British in its name, but is actually a Russian institution. To my surprise, the administration department head of the British school was well equipped for the situation and provided me with a beautiful PDF with many stamps, signatures, and watermarks, speaking the visual language of a truly Russian institution. I thought with these documents, nothing can go wrong. 3 days later, I received a message from Aliona. Irina cannot reach her contact person at the factory anymore. The mother of the contact person recently passed away and she's currently overwhelmed with personal issues. We will receive a confirmation on the 27th of February if the visit to the factory can happen. 27th of February is 2 days before we were going to the factory. Now, this might seem trivial, but going outside of Moscow with a group of 15 students in the context of a larger exhibition makes things a bit more complicated. February 27th. Aliona gets a call from Irina that the visit can't happen. The only issue is that we still need to prepare a formal letter addressed to the director of the factory, including the names of all the visitors. Once again, my colleagues in the administration department helped me to overcome technical issues, such as choosing a middle name for me, which is a necessary asset to any Russian official procedure. A photograph of the letter is sent to Irina to make sure everything is correct. All looks good, but wait, the stamp is missing. So here it is. We should also not forget to bring tea to the factory. As a thank you, loose tea. If we cannot find the right tea, we can bring chocolates. So here's a snippet from a conversation with one of my students who's also here, that were chomping that evening. Or 2 of my students actually, sorry. So finally the day had come. At 7:15 in the morning, we met with Irina at Kurskaya station and are on our way to Pavlov Posad. Irina was to wear a mink coat and a black skirt with embroidery that made it possible for us to recognize her. That's her. Once we arrived at the factory, our letter was well accepted, and we were granted entry to the factory area after having passed a soldier with a machine gun. From then we could roam around freely, and actually nobody minded me speaking English. Here are some photos from the factory ground. It's not all actually textile production, as some of the buildings are nowadays rented out to other companies. Inside the factory, everybody seemed to know that we're coming. Here are some of the things we saw, including giant spools, collecting colored thread, neon-colored weaving looms. The factory also produces bulletproof fabrics for the military. There's this lady. She's busy with the production of gobelin for the church. You see, it's a very nice 3D design. It's with just one color thread. Yeah, I don't have a video of this, but these are thousands of needles moving to make the gobelin fabric. That's the shop inside the factory. And everybody was like waiting for us, as much as we were waiting to go there. There's a bucket catching rainwater. And here is the in-house art working / design team. So, for me it was a very moving experience to finally arrive at the factory after a long game of silent post, including many bureaucratic obstacles. It felt like a discovery of a treasure, the treasure being a very human place, where all the cracks and holes are as much visible as the physical outcome and the people who make it happen. But of course it is also really sad to realize that there's such a huge communication problem between this productive and actually profitable industry and designers. I hope there will be the chance and the will for both sides to overcome this obstacle. And who knows, and this sounds maybe cheesy, but maybe once again the field of decorative arts can become a place of experimentation, one that opens up new approaches to the visible language. This is the last slide. I want to thank all the people who made the factory visit possible, of which there was many, and especially Vera Subarova, who most recently wrote a thank you letter and a spravka, I'm not going to explain that in detail, to Irina Vorobyova that she can now add to her achievements folder. Thank you very much.